Welcome to Payne on Politics, a podcast where host Dr. Gregory Payne of Emerson College sits down with fellow experts to discuss the current state of politics, public opinion, and global affairs. In a world growing increasingly complex, communication and critical thinking is key. This only makes the Emerson motto, expression necessary to evolution, more true.
Hello, this is Gregory Payne, Chairman of Communication Studies, co-director of the Emerson Blanquerna Global Center for Payne on Politics. I'm here with someone who is really a stalwart in terms of sports communication at Emerson. When we decided to launch this program, myself and Spencer Kimball, we tried to work with some of the industry leaders as well as part of the Emerson Mafia, and someone who came to mind and has been the director of the SportsCom program from the very beginning, a good friend, and I must say congratulations, Dr. Charles. A wedding is coming to Dr. Charles Steinberg.
Thank you. Who would have thought an engagement after all these years?
Well, I would say love is worth waiting for.
Yeah, well put.
Okay, but that's not, we'll not get into that at this particular time. I did, though, want to say, Charles, how lucky we are to have you.
Thank you. I'm the one who feels lucky, but I appreciate it.
Well, I think one thing that I find is students come in, and Shepard as well as Andrew, who are here, know that they get so inspired. And the one thing I would say to you is thank you for all that you've done with regard to uplifting Worcester with, of course, the stadium, and the fact that you hosted 40 students this last fall to come out to your suite. What is it like building and transforming an area like Worcester with what you're doing out with the PawSox?
It's really
with the WooSox.
The WooSox, yes. It's remarkable because this is not our first rodeo. Many years ago, 30 years ago, Larry Lucchino, Janet Marie Smith, and I were all part of creating Oriole Park at Camden Yards, which inadvertently started a revolution that we didn't foresee. And we really looked at that revolution on the major league level. As soon as we opened, while we were building Camden Yards, we had mayors flock to Baltimore saying, I need one of these. And so there were more than 20 new major league ballparks built as the offspring of Camden Yards.
As part of urban renewal of cities,
as using baseball and using the old-fashioned downtown ballpark to bring people back to downtown. And it worked. And it didn't just work in Baltimore. It worked for more than 20 major league cities. What I wasn't really paying attention to was it was working in minor league cities and towns too. And you have 120 cities and towns across North America in minor league baseball. So there are now more than 100 ballparks that are the progeny of Abraham, of Oriole Park at Camden Yards. And Worcester is the latest. It's the baby of the family, yet it's the baby created by the same people who created the ancestor, the progenitor. So Larry Lucchino and Janet Marie Smith got together again. They're the Rodgers and Hammerstein of ballpark ambiance and architecture. They'll both go in Cooperstown in the Hall of Fame for not for what they've done in baseball, but for changing the culture of American downtowns. That's a big thing. So in Worcester, we have this baby, and it's a beautiful ballpark. It's actually, of all our ballparks, it may be my favorite, and it just connects with the city. Worcester is very proud as a city. It's a city of so many pioneering moments and events. Many firsts
happened. History longer than Boston in baseball, correct?
Yeah, the 1880 National League Worcesters were they were it, you know. A fellow takes the train up from Brown University, where he's the president of his class, pitches a perfect game, gets back on the train, graduates 4 years later. Well, that's the first perfect game in Major League Baseball history by a fellow named Lee Richmond. That was in Worcester. So many things in baseball that you take for granted started in Worcester. Many things in America. The birth of the smiley face. No, not Forrest Gump. Yes, Worcester. The birth of the commercial Valentine. The invention of white chocolate. The invention of the monkey wrench. Most notably, perhaps out of all, the space industry. Robert Goddard was a little boy who climbed a cherry tree, had an epiphany, believed he could defy gravity, and he invented the first liquid-fueled rocket, which ushered in the space age. So I didn't know any of this. Everything I'm telling you, I knew nothing about. Worcester glows with its passion and its pride. So when you create a ballpark that cites these points of pride, that addresses these areas of enthusiasm, you're creating a monument to a city that's proud of itself, but more importantly, you're creating a civic gathering spot. When you can bring, for us, more than 500,000 people to an area of downtown, spring, summer, and fall, with some events in the winter too, the businesses want to be around there. So you're seeing this proliferation of investment, of restaurants, of taverns, of shops, and residential. Oh my gosh, right across the street, across Madison Street, apartments are rising. Right over here, across Washington Street, apartments are rising. Right over here, in an area where the Rolling Stones once played, a place called The Cove, they've now broken ground. So people are moving into the area, and you're not far from the commuter rail that can take you right in to Emerson.
Well, you know, Charles, when I think about what you've done, if we call that stadium diplomacy in terms of urban renewal, if we look at what was it like, because, you know, you're Dr. Charles, you were a dentist, and you grew up in Baltimore, and then here you were working with two of the great architectural icons in terms of ballparks. What was it like for you to put your stamp on Baltimore in terms of Camden Yard?
With Camden Yards, being a Baltimore native, I felt very impassioned to tell Larry Lucchino that his idea of a traditional old-fashioned downtown ballpark with modern amenities was the worst idea I had heard. He told me in October of 1986, while we were actually watching the Red Sox Mets World Series on TV, that he wanted this baseball-only ballpark. He would fine you $5 if you use the S word. It's not a stadium. Stadiums are large and multi-purpose. No, he wanted ballparks that are irregular, asymmetrical, and idiosyncratic. I said, Larry, there's no appetite for a ballpark. He said, we're actually going to build two, a ballpark for baseball and a stadium for football. I said, you're nuts. With all due respect, you're nuts. He was right. I was wrong. I have the zeal of the convert. I watched how Camden Yards not only changed downtown for Baltimore, but it changed the self-esteem of a city.
The ethos, credibility.
It is an achievement to do that. Right. Now, from the politics standpoint, how do you do that? There are always going to be vociferous naysayers. There are going to be the NIMBYs, not in my backyard. But if you're blessed, and in Baltimore we were, with political leadership in the form of a great mayor, William Donald Schaefer, Mayor Schaefer, later Governor Schaefer, said to Larry, you just build me the best damn ballpark, I'll take care of the politics. So there you did have a mayor who put himself on the line, elected governor, spent his political capital, some in the suburban Washington suburbs in Maryland derisively called him the governor of Baltimore. You know, come on, it's not all about Baltimore, but we got it done. And it worked, and it struck a chord. Now, you go to San Diego, a completely different political system, completely different makeup of the city, and it's a weak mayor form of government. So your mayor is really the ninth member of a city council. And we were looking for leadership, and we realized we were going to have to be the leaders. And that's difficult when the perceived beneficiary even though the city is really the beneficiary, is the one advocating it. It's difficult. But we built relationships with every single member of that city council and the mayor. And it took a couple years, and I think it took a couple years off of Larry Lucchino's life. I think that you know, San Diego, while this most gorgeous city that we all adore, I think it, you know, it was probably a 10-year project in 7 years for Larry. But we got it done. And listen to how hard the politics is. We chose to have a public vote. Didn't need one. And yes, it helped that we won the 1998 National League Championship. We were in the World Series, and the vote was a week later. Yes, that helped. And yes, we took that National League trophy all over San Diego in the week after we lost the World Series. Taught San Diego to not like the New York Yankees because they beat us 4 straight. So that's another good lesson we taught.
Boston knows that too.
Boston knows that.
Yes.
But we won the vote. Okay, victory. 60-40, a landslide. Not so fast. When people are resourceful in trying to slow you down, they turn, because we had won fair and square, nobody questioned that, they then turned to the legal system and tried to file injunctions. Well, 17 lawsuits were filed, 17 lawsuits were won. But you had to go 17 for 17.
So sports and politics do mix.
Sports and politics are next door neighbors. And
you live in both houses.
Well, they are not the same, but you're not going to avoid your neighbor. And you're going to need their cup of sugar, and they're going to need your cup of sugar. And you better recognize from moment one that sports and politics are next door neighbors.
So, Charles, one thing I would ask you is, as someone, we've gone into that second part, San Diego, which, of course, they say it's America's finest city. Mayor Bradley used to always say to me, be careful with that because, you know, we're in Los Angeles. One question I would ask you is, one thing that you've really taught me is the appreciation of fandom. And I know when we went to our first esports event at the Paramount, you said to me as soon as you walked in on Easter Day, oh my God, the fandom that Andrew Geiger is now teaching for us, of course, had urged us to go to. How would you compare the fandom of, say, people in Baltimore to the fandom in San Diego?
I think it's fascinating to recognize this double helix. And that is that people are people wherever you go. An 8-year-old is an 8-year-old. There's nothing different between an 8-year-old in Baltimore who loves the Orioles and an 8-year-old in San Diego who loves the Padres and an 8-year-old in Boston who loves the Red Sox. And yet cities have different cultures. Where does that happen? Why does that happen? Because Baltimore fans are very different from San Diego fans, who are very different from Boston fans, who are very different from Worcester fans. So how does it happen that if we're all the same, cities wind up having a culture, wind up having a feel? I have found that fascinating to study because the fandom, the population, has a voice, has a style, has a fashion, has a some kind of gestalt. And being from Baltimore, born and raised in Baltimore, I was of those Baltimore fans. I could recite the oral history of the Baltimore Orioles from their 1890s days in the National League, and I did recite that to our minor league players to teach them. Well, I loved the idea of diving into a fresh swimming pool in San Diego and learning a new culture. Very different. Beautiful. Beautiful city physically, beautiful people that I got to know, and yet they have grown up differently. They've grown up with the beauty of the ocean in their front yard. They've grown up with the majesty of the mountains in every vista. It's very different, but yet baseball is a common language. You don't even need words for baseball. And to that end, when we took over the San Diego Padres, I said to Larry, do you think San Diego's big enough to support a major league team? He goes, no, it's not. He said, it's 2.5 million people. He said, but the untapped fan base is Baja California. Now that's anathema to some people in San Diego.
Yes.
And we proved to them that it can be one binational harmonious fan base. So there were the folks in San Diego of various backgrounds. There were the Mexican Americans in San Diego, and then there were the Mexicans who would legally walk across that border, get on buses that we had there, and come out to our ballpark for a Sunday afternoon game. And we measured $1.5 million of revenue from south of the border when the natural but unfortunate earlier prevailing thought that made San Diego's weak years a self-fulfilling prophecy was, well, we have a border to the south, an ocean to the west, LA to the north, and a desert to the east. Well, those were fighting words for Lucchino. We went south of the border. We went into the Pacific and played baseball's first ever regular season games in Hawaii. And we went into the desert. We and enhanced our spring training site in Arizona, and we had set our sights on tackling Los Angeles, but then we moved and took over the Red Sox.
Well, I think, we'll talk about this in a bit, because one of the courses that you teach so well, and I think you're going to be teaching this week at Emerson, is Sports of Soft Power. And I think one of the things, having visited your beautiful place in La Jolla, on my route to Rosarito, and you've been down for our Rediscover Rosarito program, how baseball can be that soft power and that currency to build bridges. But before we get into that, because I know that's one of your favorite courses, you also have some very, very strong connections with Los Angeles. You've had, of course, some nice stories about Dodger Stadium and your work with Ms. Smith there. Could you give us a little bit of that story as we move from San Diego up north to Cesar Ravine?
Yeah, from San Diego, we took over the Boston Red Sox. That was John Henry, Tom Werner, Larry Lucchino. I mean, I was riding in the back of the station wagon. But a lot of us came, about 15 of us came from the San Diego Padres to the Boston Red Sox. And there, our role was not to build a new ballpark for the first time. It was to preserve and protect and enhance Fenway Park. And we did that. Well, we had won 2 World Series. We had
took a while to do that, but you.
Well, yeah. Well, it took others 83 years of waiting, but we got it done in our third year.
Thanks to Theo Epstein, who you're responsible for.
I hired Theo as an intern, 18-year-old intern in 1992 in Baltimore. But,
thank you for doing that.
Well, I'll say, I appreciate it, but it didn't take a genius to spot a genius. I mean, he's got one of the most amazing minds I've ever seen of anyone. And but yeah, so we'd all been together in Baltimore, in San Diego, Boston, and after we won the second World Series and we had sold out Fenway Park every day, we had saved Fenway Park, and the Los Angeles Dodgers were beckoning, and I had loved my time on the West Coast, and so I had the honor to go to the Los Angeles Dodgers, the team of Jackie Robinson. You could say Brooklyn Dodgers, but it's the Dodgers organization, and boy, it was pretty cool. And Dodger Stadium is as picturesque and beautiful a scene as I've enjoyed in baseball. And I was there before the commissioner of baseball, Bud Selig, plucked me and made me the first person in history to move from Malibu to Milwaukee, because that's where he, as the commissioner, actually worked from. There was an office in New York, but he was based in Milwaukee. And working for the commissioner was an honor. Then we could do a whole thing on Commissioner Selig.
I know a little bit of that story. Fascinating.
Underrated and absolutely superior he is and was as commissioner. But you've got to tell the story to understand it, because if you just go by the public relations of press conferences, you won't get it. And I would say to him, you're so spicy and funny off camera, but intentionally bland on camera. And he would go, That was intentional.
His
so we could do a whole thing on Commissioner Selig.
We'll come back to that.
But from that, I came back to the Red Sox, and Janet Marie then went to the Dodgers. And she's done yet another masterpiece of renovating and rehabilitating Dodger Stadium, which is the third oldest ballpark in Major League Baseball.
I didn't know that.
So you have Fenway Park, which she saved, Wrigley Field, which she was contemplating, but instead went to L.A., and Dodger Stadium is the third.
Now,
it's just gorgeous.
Before you move on from her, because she's been such a great mentor to Emersonians, Ben Weingarten, who, of course, would you tell us a little bit about Ben's fascination with architecture?
Yeah, I have to tell sort of two people concurrently. I'm teaching a class here, and some students are active in their participation, and some just sit there silently. But I believe that writing is the elevator for your career in Major League sports. Certainly in my experience in baseball, it's the writers who rise. And so you have to write a number of papers. I've got to help you. Why am I here? And Ben Weingarten writes this paper about how he's been to, he knows the number, but like 34 of the 30 Major League ballparks, because he had been to ballparks that no longer were even in use, and he had seen games played, outside of a team's regular home. And it was really well written. But his vision of what he saw in those ballparks was unusual. And so I met with him. He didn't speak in class. I said, I got him to pried his mouth open. The dental background helps. And I said, you know an awful lot about what a ballpark looks and feels like. I said, we could use you at the Pawtucket Red Sox, where we were thinking of building a ballpark for Rhode Island. But the Rhode Island state government, a whole nother section we could do, did not support Pawtucket. And so we went to Worcester. Well, Ben actually transformed the creative process for Larry Lucchino and Janet Marie Smith. Here are Rodgers and Hammerstein building yet another one, but they did it a very different way. And they did it a different way because of an Emerson student who could write well. And he showed us a software he had come to know as a high school student in Chicago called SketchUp. And you could actually create your vision of the ballpark and then give it to the architects, rather than have the architects show you blueprints to which you would react. And Ben absolutely changed the creative process of building Polar Park in Worcester. And Janet Marie knows talent when I discover it.
You said he's now working? Yes.
So he's with the Los Angeles Dodgers, and Janet Marie helps many ball clubs. So he's through the Dodgers. Ben has helped do renovations to PNC Park in Pittsburgh, where the Pirates play.
Well, Charles, this is one reason why, we pitched the Emerson SportsCom program, which has more numbers than any other program at the graduate level, and also is one of the most popular. I think part of it is because of the incredible networking, the relationships. So here's Ben, a little bit. I know Ben well, and I know that you are an incredible mentor, but you connect him and so many other people, and then suddenly their careers take off.
Sometimes when you take this talented student and you just put them in front of my colleagues, Hall of Famers, as Larry Lucchino's in Red Sox Hall of Fame, he's in Padres Hall of Fame, he'll be in Cooperstown. Well, they get it. And that's the same thing that happened to another student in the same class. In the same class as Ben, here's another silent student. But man, could she write.
I think I know who you're talking about. Yes.
And it wasn't just that her writing was good, her thoughts translated to writing were beautiful. So I met with Sabria Chaudhry. I said, do you have any interest in baseball? She said, I played some softball. Okay, so we've established she can speak. All right. And she wasn't shy. She was just sizing everything up. Well, Sabria is a rock star. You may not be out front ostentatious rock star to be a rock star. She is a brilliant person who has, to me, unlimited vertical mobility. And we brought her on as an intern, made her full-time. I could see her as a human resources head. She reads people with deep perceptiveness. She's just great. She wound up being instrumental in helping us establish our WooSox Foundation. And naturally, once again, Janet Marie recognizes good people when I bring them in. Janet Marie takes Sabria, and so Sabria now also is with Janet in the name of the Los Angeles Dodgers, but also helping Janet on many of her projects. So Ben Weingarten and Sabria Chaudhry, two bright Emerson students, but just like any other Emerson students, have had the doors opened, but they've made their way. There are many other Emerson students too who are on that path too. We've got Jill Guerin is out in the California League,
first female
as a pioneering play-by-play announcer. And why is she a play-by-play announcer? She was in another class at Emerson, and the class had a project where about 6 students would work on a project, and they talked to me because I was not in that class. And I went around the table, what do you want to do? And she said, I want to be a color commentator. I said, color commentator in baseball? She said, yeah. I said, why not play-by-play? Well, because you don't have women who are play-by-play. Well, actually you do, and you certainly can be. I said, look, I can give you an inning in Pawtucket on a PawSox game, and that will make you a AAA announcer on your resume. So you can do it. She has been doing play-by-play in the California League, and now a friend of hers who was a student of mine here at Emerson, Tim Quidadamo, interned with us, became head of WooSox Productions, and he is now headed to Modesto, California, where he'll be a play-by-play announcer and also director of marketing for the humorously titled Modesto Nuts, whose expression is "Let's go nuts." Hold on. An Emerson student that graduated before I came aboard had applied for a broadcasting internship with the PawSox, and someone else got it, someone who's done beautifully in Major League Sports. But my assistant, Jackie Dempsey, now Jackie Wilkes, said, by the way, there was an Emerson student who applied, and I didn't know that. She said, do you want to meet him? I said, yeah, he's from Emerson, let me meet him. So we have a cup of coffee in Boston. I said, look, I don't have a play-by-play job for you, which is what he had done in A-ball, but I've got a sales job, and if you take the sales job, you can pinch hit. Well, now Jim Kane is an everyday play-by-play announcer for us while still doing a sales job. So there are many good stories. Joe Jacobs came up through our farm system, if you will. Now he's with the Miami Heat. Sometimes people just need an opportunity. And look, that's all I was given when I was a 17-year-old intern. And that's why I've been passionate about trying to help those who have the talent, who have the passion, and who master writing, because I can't open the door for you and have you trip and fall. If you're going to get that door open, you better take that chance. But there are a lot of wonderful Emerson students who've done that.
Well, I think, Dr. Charles, it's been wonderful to see how you've mentored those people. And we go out to Polar Park, we see so many of the Emersonians who've graduated at the graduate level, undergraduate level with internships. I think for those listening, if you really want to study sports comm, you can study it anywhere. If you want to eat, sleep, and breathe it, you come to Emerson and you have great mentors. A quick segue, and we'll be bringing you back because there's so many rich stories. You're teaching a course. When you first came on board, I said, Dr. Charles, how about sports as soft power? You said, I'm not sure I understand that. But not only have you understood it, but you have championed this. Tell me about that course and why it's your favorite.
I have fallen in love with sports as soft power. I didn't know the expression, and when I learned it, I realized, well, gosh, that's what we've been doing our whole lives. And when it's the most gratifying part of a career in baseball, for me, I'm blessed that it's 47 years, that you can take baseball, take ballparks, and change society. And you can do it on a macro level, change the world the way Jackie Robinson changed the world. No less than that. I met a man when I was with the Dodgers who was visiting from Tianjin, China, and we were giving him a tour of Dodger Stadium, and he pointed to the jersey and said, Jackie Robinson. I said, you know Jackie Robinson? He goes, yeah, when I was a little boy in China and saw that the Dodgers welcomed Jackie Robinson, I thought, then maybe they would welcome me. So that's pretty big. So from Jackie Robinson to the stories of Henry Aaron, who I had the pleasure to know personally through Commissioner Selig, to Roberto Clemente, to Frank Robinson, who was a dear friend, the first African-American manager in Major League Baseball, to going beyond baseball, to Muhammad Ali, but then looking at the arc all the way to how baseball reacted to 9/11, and then the deeply personal story of which I was entirely immersed, the marathon bombing and the ceremony on Saturday, April 20th, in which David Ortiz made his unforgettable and unrepeatable speech. And I was just with David a few days ago at our winter weekend, and Johnny Gomes, a real unsung hero. And that's the moment we all go back to. And Johnny and I talked about it. We talked about the moment. Here's sports as soft power for you. We win the 2013 World Series. We intentionally stop the parade at the marathon finish line to recognize this moment. And Johnny Gomes and Jared Saltalamacchia, the two players who had asked that we have 617 Boston Strong jerseys, come down off their duck boats with the jerseys. And Johnny Gomes tenderly folds his jersey and puts it in the World Series trophy that he has placed on the finish line. And then we resume. Well, he had told me something a few weeks later, and I hoped I remembered it right. Well, on Saturday, January 21st, 2023, I told him what I thought I remembered him telling me, and he finished my sentence word for word. He wanted to take a scene of tragedy and also make it a scene of triumph, so that you couldn't look at the finish line without seeing both images. And we just reviewed it again just recently when I said, that's what I teach at Emerson. He goes, well, have me teach it too. Well, give me your phone number.
Bring it on down, yes.
So it's really phenomenal. You can look at a ball player in a uniform and relegate him to a robot. You know, he's my part-time left fielder. No, this was a really deep philosophical human being changing how we look at scenes and sights that we've all experienced all through baseball, all through sports. It may be soft power, but it is strong power.
You know, Dr. Charles, we talked earlier. I'm teaching a course on Kent State and Jackson State, the tragedies there, and would love to have you come in and speak about that. We also talk, and we'll just do a little preview, a little teaser in terms of how sports has oftentimes created people who are more or less the triggers, or at least the leaders of movements, whether it be Kaepernick, etc. When we were talking about 1970, that era described as the most divisive time in American history since the Civil War, we said that we didn't really have that type of activism at that point. Mexico City, you know, the two Black Power fists, that, of course, they took their toll. Could you give us a little bit of just kind of a quick teaser for the next time we meet for Pain on Politics to talk about sports and protest, how important you think sports, soft power, and protest is and can be?
it's become a remarkable force. And the typical words that you hear are that players and teams and associations and organizations recognize their platform. Now, social media has taken that to a high level, so that how many people will read LeBron James's words? It's phenomenally high. But with Kent State in 1970, it wasn't yet the custom for ball players to move into what I would call, or what they would call back then, being outspoken. That was the expression. If a player spoke up, he was being outspoken. Some of those players were in the National Guard and in the Army Reserves. But you didn't see players with long hair who were gonna form a protest that would block the street. It wasn't the fashion at that time for the clean-cut ball players to deviate from their team-centric lives. And now you turn the clock ahead 50 years, and my goodness, players recognize that they have a voice, a platform, a reach, and they're using it. And I think that the Emerson students in the Sports of Soft Power class, one thing they learn, because they do this, is they realize they have a voice right now. Everybody's on social media. Everybody has some number of followers. What do you want to say?
And one thing you said that's popped up is the embracement of the mental illness issue and challenge. That's been something that students have talked about.
When you gave me the opportunity to teach Sports of Soft Power, say 6 years ago, something like that, I would ask the students what the issues of the day were, because a teacher learns from their students. For several years, some of the issues would come forth. But in a COVID atmosphere and a post-COVID atmosphere, what has soared is the degree to which mental health is a topic that students feel passionately about. So much so that an earlier class that I had in Sports at Soft Power wants to stay together and work with my next Sports of Soft Power class and my graduate event planning class to do an event on sports and mental health. That's how more than enthusiastic, impassioned the students are about it. The role of mental health and the plea that these students are saying to please talk about it is, you can't miss their message. Now let's blend that and take some of our Worcester Red Sox players, sit around the table with Emerson students, have dinner, and let's talk about it.
Well, I think one thing that for people, excuse me, who have listened to you, the one thing that drew me to you when I first met you was, and this was, of course, with Paige and her mother, when she was thinking of coming to Emerson, was your passion for what you do. We've been a better program. We have been the program that we are because of that passion. I'd like to thank you, of course, invite you to come back to Paint on Politics, but also if anyone is here who would like to sit in on a class with Dr. Charles, I think you'll find him giving you the same type of insight that he gave Theo Epstein, because one thing you have to do in Dr. Charles's class is be a very good, lucid, clear writer, which sometimes surprises people. But I also would add that it's a pleasure to bring you in. We have a protege of yours coming and teaching sports as PR. Bob Sosi is going to be teaching that this year. So we've got the Patriots. And for those listening, as I said, Emerson's been telling stories since 1880. There's no better storyteller than Dr. Charles Steinberg, our director. Charles, thanks so much. And once again, congratulations on a new chapter in your life with the engagement.
Amazing. Well, thank you. And a postscript is we should recognize Emerson students stood in Fenway Park in September of 2016, thanks to Paige Lopez, thanks to the pioneering spirit of her indefatigable mom, who wanted to raise awareness for childhood cancer in honor of Paige's sister, Kate. And Major League Baseball the next year adopted childhood cancer awareness throughout the league after Paige's mom went to Major League Baseball and said, look at what we just did. Red Sox, Yankees at Fenway Park. The players did it, the broadcasters did it, and now every year Major League Baseball does it. But it was Emerson students, classmates of Paige, who got that going in September of 2016. That's pretty cool.
Well, I think it just tells you exactly what a team is all about. You have been a person who's put together teams for many years. Paige, you're in Barcelona, but I think you'll be getting this clip, so realize that your glow is still keeping us warm here in snowy Boston. So with that, thank you, Dr. Charles Steinberg, Pain on Politics. Please tune in where we'll be looking at exactly what brings us together by building bridges through this podcast. Take care, Charles.
Thank you. Thank you.